what is it about our current era that calls for centre-left progressivism? Why is the UK missing out on that, in your opinion? And what should the UK Labour Party do to learn from the rest of you?
Oh, right. Yeah. Question here. Yep, sir.
Hi, Carla Adam from the Washington Post. I have a question on abortion. How important is it?
Wide-ranging set of questions.
This is what happens. The last questions always end up as you'll learn the lesson. Well, you should learn this.
I've seen you recently condemn Roe v. Wade, so I wanted to ask about that. But on a related note, how important do you think it is for countries around the world where abortion is allowed to fully decriminalize it the way you did in 2020?
Right, and I'm hoping we're going to have it a go. I'm hoping that Anita Punwani can ask her question live. Anita, we've been trying to get through to you so you can ask your question live.
Hi.
We can hear you.
Hello.
Good.
Hello.
Fire away.
Will a time come where the fact that you are a female leader no longer be a talking point?
I think it's the right one to end on.
A great question. I'll start from the end and progressively move my way up, and strategically skip questions I don't want to answer.
No. I took a list as well.
Oh, great. So on the question of will there be a time when it no longer warrants comment that I'm a female leader? Yes, because I believe increasingly that is already the case in New Zealand. I'm the third female Prime Minister. And when I hear stories, which I've heard on more than one occasion, of mothers who will come and often say to me, I had a conversation with my daughter the other day about Prime Ministers, where my daughter met a boy who wanted to be Prime Minister, and she immediately raised the question whether or not boys were allowed to be Prime Minister. And so in my mind, it is only a matter of time elsewhere. But in New Zealand, we are well on that trajectory. Does it mean that there won't be issues that are described as sexist or gendered-based? Look, that's probably a longer road to hoe, but I do believe that we're absolutely making progress. Yeah.
Right. Well,
second question on my condemnation of Roe versus Wade. Actually, probably the way that I would characterise it is the condemnation of the loss of a woman's right to choose. And I've said this before, both in New Zealand and in other places where I've been asked the question. I grew up in what would be characterised as probably a relatively conservative faith. But I've actually long grappled with the idea that just because you may hold a conservative position on an issue, whether or not that then gives you the right or the inclination to then remove another person's ability to determine their own position, particularly when that position is whether they can determine their own health decisions. And abortion is a health issue. It is not a criminal justice issue, which is why we decriminalised and made sure that that is the way we treat it in New Zealand. And our approach is also grounded in the right of a woman to choose. And so for me, it's a very simple concept. So that's the position that we hold, and I think is broadly supported by many New Zealanders as well. On the issue of progressive governments, I haven't undertaken any particular analysis, but I might use your question as an opportunity to share something that I've been thinking about for a time. I feel as though regardless of the political persuasion of any particular incumbent right now, that there is an increasing polarisation in our societies, where perhaps we have situations where our citizens may not feel, for whatever reason, that their views are being well reflected or responded to in politics, and that may increasingly lead to fractured or more radical political manifestations. And I'm interested in what the response to that needs to be, because it is, regardless of your political persuasion, it's in no one's interest for people to lose their trust and faith in institutions or in democracy. And so I think we need to keep a constant check on whether or not our democracies are meeting the expectation of our public, in the same way that political parties need to keep a check on whether their policies are responding to the needs of their people. And here I'm going to put in a small plug. You know, in New Zealand, I do think our system of government, MMP, gives a place for people to voice their perspective and views. You've got the two major parties, centre-left, centre-right, but then you've got political parties on either side as well that give people a place to put their vote, and they can ensure that they have a chance to pick who their local representative is and also the political party. I think it's created a parliament that looks and feels like New Zealand. And now that doesn't mean that we won't have times and places where there will be dissent and disagreement. We need to foster that too. But unless we feel like our democracies reflect our people and our decisions do too, I think we'll continue to see the response to that, which will be devastating. On trade, I'm loath to ever give anyone else advice. It is hard enough to govern your own country without having other people come in and give their reckons, and so I won't do that. But what I will say is that, you know, and same as I commented in my opening remarks, whether or not it's the FTA with New Zealand, Australia, or seeking accession to the CPTPP, it's seeking to enter into, and here I might do a plug for also the ACS agreement. We have an agreement, a trade instrument New Zealand helped author on climate-based trade to try and keep the free flow of climate-related goods and technology. You know, here I would encourage the UK, as it is, to reach into these trade instruments, because increasingly they are the way that we will create greater resilience in our regions. We have a number of economies where actually the trading options and economic ties are squarely in one direction, because the options and opportunities don't exist elsewhere, and that means that we have vulnerability and a lack of resilience. So the more that the UK does that, and we encourage likewise the United States to enter our economic architecture, I think the better off we'll all be. And the final question, the exodus. So I wouldn't describe, I mean, New Zealand has a very unique relationship with Australia where our people move between our two countries, long-standing. We have a unique relationship with the UK where we have a working holiday visa scheme which allows our young people to move between our two countries, and I was a benefactor of that. We have never feared the movement of our young people because in our minds it gives a level of experience that we ultimately benefit from. So I took home everything that I learnt here. I have a great affinity and love of your nation as a result of my time here, and in fact I consider that people-to-people contact to be good for diplomacy, good for international relations, good for New Zealand. So I'll never discourage a young person from taking those experiences.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. Thanks for taking so many questions, and you can tell by not just the amount of people here, but by the intensity and variety of the questions, what's going on. One of the questions we didn't get to from, I think it was Neen Jeffs, was about whether democracies can rebuild trust, and that was one of her big worries. In a way, I felt that as you were answering the questions, you were in the process of showing, I think, that that's part of what you believe your mission is. And I think, Nina, you know, you got the answer to your question in a lot of the answers, Prime Minister, that you provided. And I think when you said that you're doing things on your own terms, you were talking about foreign policy. But clearly New Zealand, under your leadership and your predecessors, is also trying to do that business of rebuilding trust under your own terms as well. And you can tell by the presence here, people are watching very closely, and I might add, with admiration. I do want to say a shout out and thanks to High Commissioner Bede Corrie. We were working on this visit for a little while. I'm glad we got it together. It's a long way to come, even via Madrid, but you can tell by our members are thrilled that you did. Thank you very much for answering so many questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
One more applause. And stay in your seats.